Okay, as promised on last weekend's live stream, we're having a quick look at the NRL ladder after round 20, and it's really interesting. The fact that 10 teams have a positive for and against when it comes to points differential for points scored rather over points conceded. The top four have gained some separation. And I would say the bottom four, potentially the bottom five, it's going to potentially be a shootout for the wooden spoon. They are really nosediving. I think some coaches could lose their jobs before season's end. What is also really, really interesting is from the Broncos in 5th with 26 points to the Roosters in 10th with 22 points. It's a dogfight. It really is. And that points differential is going to prove so crucial because all these teams have positive points differentials, but they've scored more points than they've conceded. But there are some teams that are scoring at a far greater rate and have far stronger attacks than others, and it's really, really eye-opening when you look at that for and against points differential for points scored over points conceded. Now, without any further ado, let's have a look at the ladder in reverse order from last to first, and we're going to start with the Titans because they are currently propping up the NRL ladder. They have 14 points overall on the season and a minus 157 points differential with points scored versus points conceded. That is the second worst defensive record in the league in regards to points differential. And looking at Des Hasler in the locker room at the weekend following their latest defeat, of which they've had many, it's very clear he's lost the room. Now, there are reports coming out that his next game will be his last game in charge. There are also those reports that have been reported that this season is going to be his last anyway. He is going to retire as a head coach. Now, that means he will not have fulfilled his 3-year contract at the Titans, and you can see the situation there is not good. The atmosphere around the playing group, the coaching group, it's rock bottom. And what is scary is this Titans side individually has some very talented players. Very talented players. I've been saying this for some time. But as a team, it's just not functioning. They've had issues with injuries, yes. That has hampered them. But this is a long-term problem with the Titans of a lack of consistency. They're an average team. They've only made the top 8 4 seasons in their existence. And it looks very likely that Des Hasler's lost the room anyway, and the Frizzell family have decided they want to move in a different direction. It's going to be interesting whether the next game is his last or if he makes it to the end of the season, but they're looking very likely as one of the candidates to be wooden spoonists. However, from the Cowboys down, from 13th down, all these sides are nosediving when it comes to their form. And there's only a handful of points between the bottom 5 clubs. And their defences are all absolutely porous. They're like a sieve. A sieve would be better defensively than what these sides are putting up. The defensive numbers of these sides are absolutely shocking. So the Eels and the Bunnies are tied on 16 points. They're just above the Titans. The Eels are in 15. The Bunnies are in 16. They both have a minus 149 points differential. Basically, the only way to tell these sides apart is on the head-to-head because the Eels are above the Bunnies. And when you look at it, their attacks are virtually identical and their defences are virtually identical. The Eels are showing a lot more fight than the Bunnies, however. I have to say that. And yes, the Eels had a disastrous start to the season, so they gave all their rivals a head start. There was question marks over Jason Riles, who was appointed. Obviously, they missed out with Mitch Moses not being there. That hampered their attack, and so their spine's gone through various combinations in the halves. But in saying that, there are some green shoots of recovery at the Eels. The Bunnies, however, the same issues persist at the Bunnies. Injuries are also playing a part, but Wayne Bennett, after that strong start to the season, there was some real positive hope that they could be a dark horse for the top 8. Their season's collapsed. Their season has collapsed. They are nosediving. And I think the Eels have a bit more about them to get out of the bottom 3. I think the Eels are looking upwards in regards to how they're playing. They're playing for the coach. They're playing for each other. It's a tough season. It's a rebuilding season, but you can see the green shoots of growth there. The Bunnies, yes, injuries are massively hampering the side, but you've got to look at that squad and you've got to look at the leadership group within that squad, and we know who we're talking about here. And you've got to wonder, with that salary cap the way it is and with what they're paying key players, is that part of the problem? Because Demetrio had the problem. Seabold had the problem. Wayne Bennett had the problem. Wayne Bennett's come back in. And a lot of these issues go back to Maguire's time in charge. Some of the decisions taken over a long period of time at the Bunnies are having a really, a meaningful impact on them in a negative way. And with their form, all the Titans have to do is get a couple of wins, and suddenly it puts pressure on the Bunnies and their board to either back Wayne Bennett or make a decision, because Wayne Bennett's never had a wooden spoon, but there are massive issues at the Bunnies. The Eels are not perfect, they are rebuilding, but when you look at both sides play, you can definitely see there's more fight in the Eels side when players are injured or suspended or when they've been called up for Origin. That next player up mentality, you can see there's that desire there's that willingness to try, they're buying into what Jason Riles is coaching them, and you can clearly see that there's more positivity around the Eels than the Bunnies. The Knights are also on 16 points. They've got a minus 90 points differential. The issue with the Knights is their consistency and their attack being so anemic. It is a big problem. Now, defensively, they're not actually that bad. If you actually look at the further advanced analytics with what they've scored to what they've conceded, their defence isn't that bad. It is a minus 90. It is that attack that is killing them. They are being outscored by more potent sides. Defensively, they're not terrible. They're not getting smashed every weekend, but it's because their attack is just so anemic. And you would think with players like Kalen Ponga in the side, that attack would be more potent, but it isn't. And there are question marks over Adam O'Brien as the head coach and Kalen Ponga, whether he's going to stay or whether he's going to go. There's a lot of rumours circulating about this new Saudi rugby competition, this Saudi R360 competition that's brewing, that Kalen Ponga may go elsewhere, or he might go to rugby union in New Zealand, or he might change clubs, but he's not always lived up to that contract. And that also there's salary cap issues at the Knights, and Ponga's contract is part of that. He's the highest paid player in the game, and yet the Knights continue to misfire, and this season has been a real problematic season for them, and it is that attack. There are massive issues with that attack, but when they do win, they normally win quite well, but unfortunately that inconsistency has hurt them. The Cowboys are 13th on 17 points. Obviously they did get that high scoring draw against the Panthers, but their defence is now the worst in the league, minus 163 points differential, and they are on a long losing streak. They are really struggling to get any kind of form and consistency and any kind of positive momentum, and I think the top 8 is gone now for them. Their season's a write-off now. I don't think there's enough games left for them to turn this around, and that points differential, even if they went on won every game remaining, that points differential is going to kill them, because there are teams above them who've got better points differentials, and there's one team outside the top 8 who's got the second best attack in the league. So make of that what you will, and that points differential is like a lead weight. The defence has fallen apart. It has absolutely fallen apart. Their forward pack is getting bullied in games, and I mean, look, they've got some great players there. There's some great individual talents at the club, but Todd Payton's under a lot of pressure. And Todd Payton is another one of those coaches who could be on the chopping block. It is not happy times up in North Queensland. Now, 11th and 12th, the Dragons and the Tigers, again, are tied on points. However, the Dragons have a far superior for and against points differential. So the Tigers have a minus 101 points differential. The Dragons are minus 58. Both sides are on 18 points. The Tigers have improved massively over last year. I think the top 8, while they're within touching distance, I think they can make it. I think the Tigers, because of that lengthy losing streak they had, I think that's done for them. Same with the Dragons' inconsistency. They're good one week and then they're shocking the next. They're in some tight games. And I think Benji Marshall's been given a stay of execution. It's been a very disrupted season with Lockie Galvin and De Silva both leaving in the way they did. They've had some injuries, and there's some players clearly looking at potentially moving on elsewhere. And I have to admit, though, I think Benji Marshall, he has started to turn this side around. But you can see the players want to play for him. I think that is important. They are much improved from last year. There is no doubt on that. In fact, the last 3 years, the Tigers have definitely improved. you can definitely see that the players that want to be there are buying into Benji Marshall's coaching. You can see there's more positivity within that playing group, but they are still not going to make the top 8. That defence is just not good enough. And Luai hasn't really hit the form that they hoped he would. And while he has improved the leadership, and he's got a good working relationship with Coruscant from their Panthers days, Luai hasn't quite fulfilled the potential that we know he has. His try assist numbers and his line break numbers are below where they were at the Panthers. Now, you could argue he's in a weaker side. You could argue that. You could argue he's also not been fully fit the entire time. That is also a fair argument. And also the coaching is different. The forward pack is less dominant. But they have got some exciting players at the Tigers. And I think the future does look bright if Benji Marshall is given a given time to really turn things around. He was thrown into the frying pan, into the fire when he took over. I think he's doing a decent job considering there's a lot of outside noise around the club, and of course there's issues within the club as well. I think the Tigers are slowly improving. Whether the board will give him the time necessary to turn this misfiring, struggling team into a top 8 side, because they're not doing too badly considering, but I think that points differential is going to hurt them. The Dragons, however, Shane Flanagan is under pressure. And while their points differential is not horrendous, we have seen sides with negative points differentials make the top 8. We have seen that. And some of their points differentials have been horrendous. I mean, the Raiders, the last time they made the top 8, had a shocking defensive record. So if the Dragons can start go on a run and actually string some wins together, yes, they will put pressure on the sides above them, but it is that points differential. But there's also that 4-point gap between the Dragons and the Roosters in 10th. Now, the Roosters in 10th at 22 points, but they've only got a positive 8-point differential for and against in regards to points scored over points conceded. They're in a lot of tight games. What hurts the Roosters a little bit is those heavy defeats they had at the start of the season. That opening round defeat to the Broncos, that's what really has dampened their points differential. If you take some of those heavy defeats out, their points differential will be a lot stronger than what it is. Although they did lose heavily against the Sharks at the weekend, which hasn't helped, they still have that positive points differential, but they have the weakest positive points differential in the top 10. Now, they're only 2 points outside of the top 8. However, it's that consistency, and also this is a rebuilding season. I wouldn't be surprised if they miss narrowly. They have shown a lot of fight and a lot of courage considering how their season started. There has been a lot of fight. There's been a lot of player turnover. There's been a lot of injuries. We've seen a lot of inexperienced rookie players come into the starting lineup and into the Elite 30. And they've put their hands up. You can see that they're buying in. But when they lose, sometimes they lose quite badly. And that's hurt their points differential. But they're showing fight, and that is important. And they're always the Roosters are exciting to watch. As a neutral, I love watching the Roosters play because whenever they play, you know the game they are playing in is going to be fun to watch, just as a neutral. The Dolphins in 9th. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, and this is where I think the Dolphins are a really dark horse to make the top 8. And not only make the top 8, but climb up the top 8. It's their attack. Their attack is terrifying. They have the same amount of points as the Roosters of 22, but a positive 169 points differential. They have the second best attack in the league. During this origin period, the Dolphins have just exploded as an offensive force. And yes, the Dolphins, much like the Eels, had a disastrous start to the season, a very slow start to the season. They gave a head start to the teams above them, which is why they're playing catch-up. Had they started winning earlier, I think the Dolphins would be not only in the top 8, but comfortably in the top 8. Now, Tristan Wolfe has done a brilliant job. With injuries as well, there's a lot of key players in both the forward pack and the back line out injured right now. Losing Bostock on the wing is a blow because he has started to really... When he got injured, he was clicking into form. Nikorima from the halves, he's had a brilliant season. Done his hammy. Now, he will come back before finals, should they make finals, but that is a big blow. But in saying that, even with the forward pack being decimated and the outside backs having to be rejigged, I think the Dolphins can make the top 8. I really do. The way they are playing, I think they can make the top 8. Now, while they've got a positive 169 points differential, their defence, however, is a weak area. They are starting to concede points. The fact they're scoring 40 or 50 points a game is irrelevant. They are conceding 20 to 30 points a game the other end, and that is the problem. And while their attack is bailing them out, when it gets to finals, you need to tighten up that defence. And at the moment, with the injuries they have and their depth being tested, while they are still scoring tries for fun, that does impact combinations defensively. And some of these players are literally rookies that are being thrust into first grade. And while they are putting their hand up and they are doing their best, defensively that does disrupt defensive combinations and defensive trust in your outside man and your inside man. But in saying that, I think the way the Dolphins are playing, though, with all these challenges, they're fun to watch as well. Dolphins and Roosters games. If you are a neutral and don't support either club, just watch those two sides play. It is fun. It is entertaining. They have no fear. They throw the ball around, win or lose. They will go out there and they will entertain. And that is what is brilliant about watching those two sides. Now we get to the top 8, and it is very congested, as I said. From the Broncos in 5th down to the Roosters in 10th. A handful of wins and a handful of defeats completely changes the narrative of what the table, the ladder, looks like. So the Sharks are in 8th. They have 24 points. They've got a 21 points positive differential. So they do have that positive points differential, but then you look at the Dolphins chasing them down, and this is where the Sharks having that mid-season wobble, it could hurt them. They've had some bad defeats in there where they just haven't shown up, and their defence hasn't defended as a Craig Fitzgibbon side should defend. They do have injuries impacting the side. We have to bear that in mind. They are not able to put their best 17 onto the field at the moment. But that win against the Roosters was crucial. Absolutely crucial. And they scored over 30 points, which will help. But they have the weakest points differential in the top 8. And with it being so close, it will potentially come down to potentially points for and against, honestly. And with the Dolphins, the way they're playing, the Dolphins could leapfrog several sides with the way they're playing. Now, the Sea Eagles, much like the Sharks, are on 24 points. In 7th, they have a positive points differential of 60, which puts them in a stronger position than the Sharks should the Dolphins really continue their good form and the Sea Eagles and the Sharks continue to be a little bit inconsistent. And, because of that, those 39 extra points in the positive, that puts them in a slightly stronger position. But they are still vulnerable, because if the Roosters and the Dolphins both start putting a good string of performances together, the Sharks and the Sea Eagles, for me, are the most vulnerable inside the top 8 to slip out of the top 8. The Panthers have gone on a fantastic run of form lately. They're on a lengthy win streak. They're 6th, 25 points, 45 in the positive points differential. There was a point where they were in a negative points differential. With their winning streak lately, they've turned that around, but it is a weak positive points differential. Now, their disastrous start to the season has obviously meant they are playing catch-up to the tight teams above, their big rivals. They had that disastrous run of defeats where they just could not win. After their opening round win in Vegas, they just went on a lengthy losing streak, and we were thinking, Christ, this Panthers side is in deep trouble. They were last on the ladder at one point. They have miraculously turned it around. You've got to put that down to coaching. They do have injuries. There are some fitness concerns around key players. The spine has been rejigged between different halves combinations, different spine combinations. The forward pack is, I wouldn't say, at full strength. We've seen injuries in the outside backs. We've seen young players thrust in, potentially before they're ready. I think you could argue that. And with that player turnover, has it finally caught up to the Panthers a little bit? The system remains the same. The players there are buying in, but they're not the Panthers side of the last 5 years. That is what's clear and obvious. This season is a down season for them. Yet they have still made the top 8 as things currently stand. And the way they're playing, they could finish higher than that. In saying that, the Broncos are 5th on 26 points. They have a points differential of a positive 80. Now, the way they started the season, there was this hope that the Broncos, under Michael Maguire, was going to turn things around and things were looking rosy. And then we had a mid-season blip, like a lot of sides have had mid-season blips. And there was concerns that Maguire potentially had lost the dressing room. There were reports coming out of players not being happy with how things were going. Now, there are still issues at the Broncos, regardless of their league position. There are still issues there. There are reasons why Kevin Walters left. There's reasons why Anthony Seibold left. And even when Wayne Bennett left after his second stint, there are still issues within the Broncos, within the organisation, within the playing group, the board, and the culture around the club. There is still things not right with the Broncos. However, when they get it right and when they play well, they are fantastic to watch. But when things start going wrong, there's a mentality issue there. And while they've got that positive points differential, that wobbly bit of form they had just before the beginning of Origin, I think has hurt them a little bit. They should be much higher on the ladder with what their potential could be. And because they had that string of poor performances, there's that bit of separation now between the Broncos, who've now turned things around, much like the Panthers, and the top four. And I think the top four will remain the top four. Now, in what order the top four end up being the top four, that is for discussion, because the Warriors are fourth. They've got 30 points, but they have got a very weak attack, and that is the problem with the Warriors. Their defence is perfect. The teamwork is brilliant. Injuries are going to hurt them. Losing Metcalf for the rest of the season is a massive, massive blow to the Warriors. The way he was playing was fantastic. They have responded after a down year last year, much like the Broncos have. They responded after losing their opening round in Vegas to the Raiders. They responded well after that defeat. However, their attack is their weakness. They do not score enough points compared to their rivals, which is why they're fourth and not third, not second, not first. Because that attack is on the weak side. The forward pack is mobile, it's strong, it's powerful. But they have lost players to injury, key players to injury, and I think that could hamper them. However, in saying that, if it's a close game, you can bet on the Warriors to win. They've got a lot of fight about this side. There's a good teamwork ethic, good commitment for each other. But I think that weakness in attack could hurt them come finals. I think they finish fourth. I think fourth is the Warriors, and I think the top three, that's up for debate who finishes where, because the Storm, third currently on 30 points, their points differential is just ridiculous. 218. They've got the best attack in the league. However, they lost at the weekend, and they lost in a fashion that was very unstorm-like, and Craig Bellamy was not happy with the team's performance. And there's been some performances this season with the Storm that do raise some questions about the team's discipline, their work rate, their work ethic, and are all the players buying in? Because the Storm, their systems are, well, there's a reason why they are consistently a top four side. Sometimes top five, they might slip down to fifth, but there's a reason why consistently, season after season, they make finals. It's a well-oiled machine at the Storm, but there's a few cracks and creaks appearing in what should be an invincible Storm side. They're everyone's pre-season favourites for the minor premiership and the grand final, yet they're 4 points off top spot. There have been some performances which do raise some eyebrows about the Storm and the playing group that's currently there. There also are some injuries. Cameron Munster will not be there this weekend for family reasons. His father passed away. So they're going to be missing Cameron Munster this weekend, which is a big loss. And should the Bulldogs and the Raiders both win, again, that points gap grows. And so the Storm, I expect a response. I expect them, worst case scenario, to finish third. The top two is the two biggest surprises of the season for me, because in second place is the Bulldogs, long-time leaders of the NRL this season, 32 points, a positive 98 on the points differential. Now, of course, Lockie Galvin's introduction into the squad has, I think, disrupted things a little bit. In saying that, the area I think the Bulldogs do need to improve is their attack. Is Lockie Galvin an upgrade over Toby Sexton, a downgrade, or is it about the same? Has it disrupted the unity within the playing group? These are questions that the finals will give us an answer to. The Bulldogs have played fantastically this season. This has backed up last season's top 5 finish. No one expected them to be that good last year. It backs up Serraldo's coaching as well. This shows that the players are buying in. This has been a lengthy rebuild for the Bulldogs, and finally we're reaching the other side of that, where the Bulldogs are a top 4 side again. They've got a fantastic fan base, a very passionate fan base, and they have struggled over the years since Des Hasler left the club. They have struggled. They've had issues with their salary cap. They've had issues with player development, their junior development. They've struggled at the wrong end of the table for a long time. The last couple of seasons, they've now turned a corner, but their attack is not as good as the Storm or the Raiders, and I think that is where they could end up finishing third rather than second or first. I think the Storm potentially could overtake the Bulldogs with that, and with that superior points differential, that goes in the Storm's favour for and against. But the big big surprise for me in a what was meant to be a rebuilding season is my team, the Raiders. I've left the best for last because they've got 34 points and a positive 132 points differential. And I was sceptical when Ricky Stewart was given that contract extension. I was sceptical about the Raiders' chances to make the top 8 this season, considering they've lost a lot of leaders over the last couple of seasons. But this team, these young players have stepped up. The way they play, their style of play is so unorthodox at times. Defences struggle to defend it. And they are entertaining to watch. And I know there's a little... I'm trying not to be biased, but they are entertaining to watch. They do entertain. And when they click and they turn it on, it's... Some of these players are playing out of their skins, like their contracts are up for renewal. They are playing, for the coach. Their fitness is a lot better than in previous seasons. That is something that I think is very noticeable. They're a lot fitter. They've got, a good team unity. You can see these are players that are all buying in, all working for each other. Defensively, much improved. Massive defensive swing in the positive. Because their points differential the last couple of seasons has been a minus 130, 140, 150, 160. They have completely turned that defensive system around. And the defensive energy is there. The commitment is there. So, I think the Raiders are going to finish top 2. I think the Bulldogs will finish in the top 3. The Storm, it's whether they, still have this inconsistency with, some down performances and some good performances. Because the Storm, we know how machine-like they are. But at points this season, they've won one, lost one, won one, lost. They went through this period of win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. The Warriors, they need to find a way to get that attack to click without Metcalf in the halves. In saying that, defensively, they are very solid. They win close games. They've now figured out a way to win close games when in previous seasons they would lose those close games. The rest, it's from 5th to 10th. There's going to be a lot of movement there because it's so condensed. I think the Dolphins are the dark horse to make the top 8, who are outside the top 8. I think the Sharks and Sea Eagles are very, very vulnerable. Potentially even the Panthers are very vulnerable with that points differential being so much weaker than the Dolphins. I think the Roosters would have to seriously go on a win streak and win big in a lot of games to turn their meagre positive points differential around. I think anyone below the Roosters, they're not making the top 8. In fact, some sides are plummeting for the wooden spoon. I think that's going to be a spoon-off between the Titans, Bunnies, Knights and Cowboys, because those 4 sides, I think the Eels have got enough fight to start pulling away from the wooden spoon. But the Cowboys, Knights, Bunnies and Titans, I think they're cooked. Their seasons are done. I can't see how those sides, with how their form's going and the body language of the players, I can't see how those sides can turn things around. And there are some coaches there. Des Hasler, we know he's out of a job. We know he's going. Wayne Bennett never had a wooden spoon before. This could be the first season that happens, and then there'll be question marks whether Wayne Bennett was the right guy to reappoint back at the Bunnies after he'd left the Bunnies and Jason Demetriou came in as his replacement that he recommended. That's an interesting question mark. Adam O'Brien at the Knights, he's been on the hot seat ever since he got there because the side has consistently underperformed. Even when they do make finals, they don't do much in the top 8. But the Knights have consistently underperformed for some time. The Cowboys under Todd Payton, their defence has just given up. They've given up defensively. And yes, again, injuries impacting. Every side's got injuries. But the Cowboys, their defence has just waved the white flag. They concede points as like it's a hobby. So there we go. There's a quick look at the NRL ladder after round 20. Thank you so much for getting through nearly a half-hour video. It was maybe a quick look, but it wasn't. It took a bit longer than I anticipated. A really interesting season. This season, anyone can beat anyone. That's something that has also been noticed. And as I say, from 5th down to 10th, that is an open-ended question who ends up being in the top 8. I can see a lot of changes happening there. I can see some sides who were looking pretty comfortably in the top 8 earlier in the season slipping out. And those sides looking in, like the Dolphins and the Roosters, potentially unseating those sides that are currently there. I think the sides most vulnerable to dropping out the top 8 of the Sea Eagles and the Sharks, and I think the Dolphins are a dark horse. If they continue to play the way they are, they could finish as high as 5th. I honestly believe that with the form they are showing and the freedom they play with. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you, but from me for now, that's goodbye from me, and I hope to see you all here next time very very soon.